Hello and welcome to The Queer Gaze, a gay movie podcast dedicated to examining queer representation and issues.
We're starting a new mini-series theme with this episode, Conrad. So we are going to shift our attention to family drama.
Ooh.
And if you want more of the discussion, then please be sure to support The Queer Gaze and come listen to some more spoilerific conversations over at patreon.com/thequeergaze.
You can also get early access to regular main feed episodes as well as extra content.
Yes, and you can follow us on social media at The Queer Gaze.
So Joe starting a whole new mini-series this time.
Mm-hmm.
Family drama. Who doesn't love a bit of drama?
Oh my god, the drama. And we are starting with the most drama-filled entry. Well, actually, you know what? That's probably not even true, but we're definitely starting with a big one.
Mm-hmm.
So we're back on the popular side of the equation. We're talking about director Mike Nichols, as well as screenwriter Elaine May's 1996 film, The Birdcage.
Oh, yes.
So, folks, if you are like me and you have not seen this film in going on 30 freaking years, here's what you missed on The Birdcage. So, this is based on a 1978 French farce called La Cage aux Folles, which itself was based on a 1973 play. And in this movie, we have Armand, who is played by Robin Williams, and Albert, Nathan Lane. They are a gay couple who own a successful gay bar down in South Beach, Florida. When Armand's son Val, played by Dan Futterman, announces that he is marrying Barbara, Callista Flockhart, the daughter of Louise, Diane Wiest, and conservative Senator Kevin Keeley, Gene Hackman, a ruse is set in motion that requires houseboy Agador, played by Hank Azaria, to act like a butler, and Albert to pose in drag as Val's mom. Will the Keeleys be fooled? What about their own sex scandal? And can the predatory reporters lurking just outside the gate be held at bay? Hilarity, ? Ensues.
Yes. So where to begin? I think possibly with the question that I pitched at you in our chat, which was, is this funny?
Yeah, folks, we've had several conversations offline about how to approach this, because you have to go in understanding the context that this is a 1996 film, and it was aimed as like a 4-quadrant blockbuster comedy, right? Like, this movie does incredibly well. It's very, very financially successful, which means that a lot of people who don't identify as queer went to see it. So clearly something about this hit in 1996. And I always knew it was going to be a struggle, because you anticipate that this is going to be based around gay stereotypes, and it very much is. And I couldn't remember if people thought the same back in 1996, or if this is just us, unable to peel off the 2025 glasses.
Yeah, exactly. And there's nothing more churlish than criticizing a film for being a product of its era.
Right, yeah.
But at the same time, it is instructional to look at the differences in terms of the representation for a specific era.
Yes.
And also, as you say, to look back and see what were the contemporary reviews, because you might expect that maybe they were less well attuned to good representation, but in actual fact, I did find some fairly negative criticism at the time. And I have to remember that, of course, there were things like people protesting outside Basic Instinct premieres and things like this as well. But at the same time, it does need to be lauded for bringing a largely positive perspective on queer characters to a mainstream blockbuster with an A-list cast.
Yeah, like this, when we talked about things like Brokeback Mountain, that was a big deal because you got high-profile actors who identified as straight to play these queer roles. And if you look back, it's 9 years earlier than Brokeback, and we've got Robin Williams, arguably at the height of his career, playing very effeminate. Arguably, he's the masculine part of the equation, but this is still like no doubt in anyone's mind, this man is queer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was trying to see what else was out and about, so to speak, in the 90s. And you didn't really have a lot. You've got The Crying Game in
Mm-hmm.
1992, which again suffers in retrospect. The Wedding Banquet, the Ang Lee movie, that was something that I was intending to bring up
Okay.
in our review of A Nice Indian Boy,
Right.
because again, it's focused around a wedding, focused around family drama, very much in the same way
Mm-hmm.
as we are here. There's a running theme there. And of course, Philadelphia, the Oscar winner in 1993,
Right.
which again, some progress,
Mm-hmm.
but not a lot.
I mean, I'm going to add to your list because I was thinking, okay, yeah, what are the big queer films, but also what are the big queer comedies? Because I do think that that's an important lens through which we have to look at this film. So we've got Priscilla, Queen of the Desert in 1994, Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar in 1995,
Yeah.
this in 1996, and then In and Out in 1997. So it kind of felt like we were getting one big. I mean, I don't think anyone is going to say Priscilla, Queen of the Desert was like a 4-quadrant blockbuster, and it's also Australian, so it's the one that sort of stands outside of that list. But it did feel like we were trying to do one relatively mid-sized to large mainstream gay comedy each year.
Yes, and also focusing very much on characters that were larger than life, very
Mm-hmm.
performative,
Yeah.
very extreme, very funny. And this particular one, I think success is kind of leaning on the fact that it's a sitcom. It's a situational comedy. It is a classic setup. There's a group of people who are trying to hide something from another group of people
Mm-hmm.
through a wide range of increasingly ridiculous means. And
Yes.
you get to laugh at the tension and you get to wait with anticipation for the moment when it all comes crashing down.
Yeah. And I appreciate, in some ways, I think it's really easy to look at this film as an update of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, only instead of race relations, we're swapping it out for sexual orientation. But one of the things I did discover I appreciated about this film is that the queer people, they're definitely the subject of mockery, not necessarily derision, but definitely, we're laughing at how ridiculous the queer people are. But I think we're also laughing at how ridiculous the conservative family is, because it's not as though only one half of the equation is play acting or participating in this ruse. The Keeleys also need to go along with all of this shit because they're trying to bury their own black sheep scandal.
They are, yes. Rather amusingly, Kevin, played by the late Gene Hackman, may he
Mm-hmm.
rest in peace, wonderful actor. He has discovered he's a Republican who is part of some
It's like a moral.
action group. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And he's just discovered that the co-founder of his particular group has been found dead in bed with a sex worker who is underage and black. And you get a
Yes.
very clear sense that there is a hierarchy of undesirability and scandal as he rolls those adjectives out.
Mm-hmm.
But that is the cloud that is hovering over Kevin as he embarks upon this meet the family dinner evening.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it puts people on a very level playing field. And you're right that they are equally satirized for their views. And really, the straight man in this, oddly enough, is Robin Williams.
Yeah.
Not a role I would necessarily put him in.
No, he definitely gets a couple of moments of big, outlandish physical comedy. Like when he's directing Albert, we see that he's working with this younger queer man. And in order to capture the mood he's looking for from this young gay actor, he basically goes through a litany of famous dance performers or choreographers. And it's very jazz hands, lots of motion, lots of kicking and so on. But then you bring it all inside. And in some regards, it feels like this is Robin Williams telling on himself as a performer. Like that's kind of what he's doing. He's taking all of the manic energy he's so well known for as a comedic performer, and he's buttoning it up to play the straight man, quote unquote, part of the equation in this gay couple.
And he does it very well.
Yes.
He's quite affecting,
Mm-hmm.
actually, as the world-weary husband of this pairing because of course it's based on gender binaries, very heteronormative in the relationship. Nathan Lane's Albert is very much coded as a ridiculous, sentimental, dramatic, jealous,
Yep.
catastrophizing, shrieking queen. And he's obviously wearing poor Armand down over the years, but he's kind of seen it all before, and he knows that if he just waits for the cooling off period, things will settle down.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting role for Robin at this point of his career.
It is, yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think he's performing this really, really well. I do think one of the challenges that I specifically have with the gendered portrayal of this gay relationship is we're conflating drag queen with like a soft trans read.
Yeah.
And I will confess, you know, having spent quite a lot of time in gay bars around drag queens and even around, you know, principally gay groups of people, like I'm on several gay sporting teams and so on, we do have a tendency to refer to ourselves as she's and hers and girl and that kind of stuff. So some of this definitely tracks, but especially in this movie, which is made by what I can tell entirely straight people, at least from like the Mike Nichols, Elaine May creative pairing, like there is this almost misunderstanding that if Albert is dressing up as a woman, then he must want to be referred to as a woman, as she, as her, even when he is not in drag and performing. And that to me is just like, you don't understand the nuance of gender and sex.
Yeah. There is a moment where Albert says that he is a woman, and Armand corrects him, and he doesn't react very well to that. Yeah, I think this is typical of the period, though. I mean, all of those comedies that you mentioned just conflate the two, just put it all in a big box labeled queer, and then just let it strut about the stage with a feather boa on. And the mainstream understanding of it was very poor. I also think it's safe.
Right.
It's non-threatening.
Just that. Because I think to kind of bring it back to not where we were at as a culture in the mid to going on late 90s, but the reality is that this is a movie, like all movies technically, that was designed to make money. Like, you're not casting Robin Williams in this role so that you can make $1 million off this movie. Like, you want a gigantic box office cross appeal hit. And that's what you get, but it does so by sort of playing to a lowest common denominator and then going for big body jokes, like the sort of more stereotypical, the more flamboyant, the louder, and so on. Like, that's what's going to play to the back of the theater for everybody who's ever said, like, well, I know gays. Yeah. I know a mincing queen when I see one.
And those figures have been in sitcoms for a very long time, particularly on British television. I don't know whether it's the same in Canada. But those characters have always been there. The big mincing, effeminate people who are calling each other bitch and so on. Yeah. That's always been there.
And to be clear, like, it is representative of a certain type of gay person. Like, there's a reason that stereotypes exist. It's just more, I think, when you look at the films that were doing this big box office, they did have a tendency to play into this side of the stereotype. And, you know, we can talk a little bit about some genuine emotional moments because, as you said, Robin Williams is the straight man, but I think there are a couple of key scenes that really humanize even Albert that I think are worth recognizing, because in a lesser movie, we would have just jumped by this and he would have been the shrill, you know, effeminate one the entire time. So I did appreciate that we get a little bit of an understanding of who these two are as a real couple, and it's not just big, broad laughs the whole time.
Their relationship is believable. As ridiculous as it is believable. But I think that's the strength of the two actors. I think Nathan Lane, even though he is saddled with this ridiculous, over-the-top character, you're right, he does manage to rein it in, and most of it is focused on their child.
Right.
Or the child that they've raised together. I believe it's only Armand's biologically.
It is, yeah.
Their genuine affection for and nurturing care for and pride in their son is palpable and very relatable. And I think that's another thing that they are. Had this been a childless pair. I think it would have been harder for a mainstream audience of the time to get on board with. A love of your child is something that everybody can relate to, an excitement about marriage as well, and meeting their prospective partner. I mean, it's universal.
Yeah, and it's also classic fare for comedies, right? You know, you mentioned A Nice Indian Boy off the top. We talked about that film back in April. And there's the potential for comedy from any nuptial themed story because, of course, it's a period of high stress. You've got people who wouldn't normally interact, who are forced to come together and make amends and make things work for the sake of being polite, for the sake of appeasing their children, and so on. So I think it's good natural fodder, but you're right, it does. Yeah, I think it's another way to level the playing field. Like, this is two pairs of parents who have to be willing to do anything to support their children.
Yeah, and weddings at the end of comedies is as old as time.
Yes.
Practically everybody got married at the end of Shakespeare comedies. And what I love about this one is it also points a way towards the future, because although you do have the bride's family on one side and the groom's side on the other side, and they are eyeing each other with some suspicion, they are all there together to celebrate a young couple's love for each other and their potential future together.
I do want to circle back to that when we get to a category on our Patreon conversation, because I'm not sure I fully buy this ending.
Ah, interesting. Well, it's certainly progressive in terms of representing that there is a way for these people to get along.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So progress, big hit. And I must admit, I didn't laugh at all when I watched it. Well, not true. I laughed at one particular moment, but that's just because my sense of humor is pretty dark.
Can you remember what part it was?
Yes. Well, as you were saying, so the very, very conservative parents are being mocked just as much as the queer characters, or at least being made to seem as ridiculous as, let's put it that way.
Right.
And it's Albert taking what the parents of the bride are saying to him and making it even more ridiculous and throwing it back at them.
Oh, I know what part you're going to say.
And it's when they're talking about punishments for
abortion,
doctors performing abortions. And Albert throws back, well, I think you should just kill the
mothers. It is.
Yeah, that tickled me.
Oh, boy. Yes. Is that ever a controversial statement?
It is. Yeah. And he lands it. It's very funny. And they listen to him. They think it's quite a reasonable position. He's showing them the ridiculous end game of what they're talking about. And they just accept it on face value and think about it.
I will say, I can't help but wonder if part of that, yes, is because you're a big old sicko, much like myself, but also because I think it sadly does reflect a contemporary political point of view, which is like, well, you don't actually care about this. Like, just take it to the logical conclusion, as you suggested. Just get rid of women. Stop, giving them any kinds of rights. Murder them if that's the case, because who fucking cares?
Yeah, exactly.
Grim.
It points it out in a very amusing context, which I enjoyed a lot. And I enjoy Nathan Lane. I think Nathan Lane is funny.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to watch this knowing that for the people in the know, for the people probably in the New York theater scene, they would know that this is him putting on, yes, a performance, but Nathan Lane is an out gay man.
Yeah.
But of course, when the movie is made, he is not publicly out to the vast majority of audiences. So this would have been seen in the same light as Robin Williams.
Yeah. And I believe Robin tried to steer him away from outing himself inadvertently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he looked out for him, because this was not the climate for that, not yet. We were over the worst of the AIDS crisis, I think, at this point, but still,
it was not safe, and it was not fun to be a gay person, even in Hollywood, even with a movie of this kind of stature riding on your performance. Like, when you look at the reviews, Lane is the one who gets singled out almost entirely, because this is the standout comedic performance of the film.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But he seems to have weathered it very well.
Yeah. I will confess, I'm not surprised at all that you struggled with the comedy. As we've noted before, I think dramas are a little bit easier to understand as sort of universal acclaim or appeal, and then comedies are just that much more subjective. And I don't have a good read on your particular sense of humor, but I'll admit I also struggled with this one a little bit. I found moments of comedy. Like, I quite liked Hank Azaria's Agador, like just something stupid, like his inability to wear shoes. So he's just constantly pratfalling around. I like the moments where the tension becomes so unbearable that everyone is just having a freak out in the kitchen. Like, what do you mean there's no entree? All we've got is this shitty soup, and so on. Like, there are moments that feel, I guess, a bit universal in terms of their comedic appeal, like somebody falling, somebody having a hissy fit and freaking out. I even didn't mind Nathan Lane's kind of shrill laughter at points, but I definitely did find that there were times where I just found the performance a little too grating. It was a little too ridiculous. And those were the moments where I had to remind myself, this is farce. Like, it's beyond comedy. We've gone fully into ridiculous camp territory.
Yeah, it's winking at the camera, but it's very much there to be enjoyed as a spectacle. It's not there to be treated as a believable representation of reality in any way.
And I do wonder, and maybe this is where we can start to wrap up this part of our conversation, but do you think that this movie is even for queer audiences?
No. Because who's going to see themselves in this?
Yeah. Like, I, as I said, I do think there's probably some stereotype that rings true to people, but also even that it's just so augmented. Like, to me, as you suggested, this feels like a kind of safe way to get straight people to consume queer media. Like, we're playing to the thing that you already believe, which is that gay men are incredibly effeminate, obsessed with penises, and can barely act in proper society.
Yeah. But I mean, overall, it's harmless. It doesn't present them as monsters or homicidal maniacs, which is a lot of what the queer community was getting in the 90s.
Yes. Yeah. They weren't out to corrupt your children.
No. So it was helpful.
Because that's the other thing, right? Is like, it's not as though Val identifies as gay. It's not like he's bringing home a boy to meet them or something. So in some ways, this makes them sexless and non-threatening in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it does. Although I noticed that he has to specify that it's a girl.
He does. Yes. I appreciated that moment as well.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I feel like we have a lot of other things that we're dancing around, or maybe we're leapfrogging like figures on a bowl. So why don't we take this conversation over to Patreon so we can dig into some of the details.